Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Where do temporary desires lead, and what is the effort behind them? And could that effort have a sort of eternal abstract dimension to it? So, this is a very big idea. Okay. Desires are a living being's way of using ideas to continue breathing. Our desires seem to be between two worlds, the world of our body and mind. Now, the world of the mind, it leads you to the unknown. The more you think about ideology, spirituality, abstraction, imagination, your God pretty much becomes the unknown. The principle that justifies your reality becomes unknown, so you find this strange contentment with all knowledge because it's all kept in an unknown way and you've accepted that unknown quality. The other side of the coin is that knowledge becomes your God. And when knowledge becomes your God, it is suggesting this smaller world behind the eyes of the being. And I don't want to say smaller, but it's like there's a world behind your eyes that is seeing the world in front of your eyes, and both of them are present in value and meaning. That means as you're standing here, you're not just mere atoms. You are you. You are the story that you have been telling yourself to keep you going. So I found it very interesting. To be honest, what really inspired this talk tonight is that I noticed that when I desire for success, when I want hope, when I was like a young kid in a soccer game, and I was like I had the ball and I would dribble and I would go score. It was one of those situations where, how can I tell you? It was like either you sculpt reality or reality sculpts you. So the person who is told by his environment to keep going, work hard, endlessly put effort until you attain the goal, that person's mind has chosen to continue regardless of the conditions of the body. It is like an unconditional command of your will upon the plane of existence. It's really how your consciousness is not just an idea of you or just an image of a world. Your consciousness is a deciding element. It is so important. It is so important how your attention is holding the world, because that suggests how the world is holding your attention. So I thought, what is the motivation of temporary beings? And I noticed something remarkable. None of us, even though We might, like, in plain conversation or even in scientific circles, totally acknowledge that this body that we are and everything that's being projected from the brain, the final curtains will at some point be pulled for everybody. However, what is unique is that the behavior of people doesn't seem to be temporary. We want to survive as long as we can. That seems to me an eternal effort. We want to, in some sense, get the best thing. Like when you look at modern society, it is not a work of art. It is a kind of a sort of work that is destroying art. We must not just take care of people's physical existence, but their also non-physical dynamism of intelligence. That means there's a way that you as a person find yourself in a moment where you experience life more as an object or subject of observance. This especially occurs through communication and interaction with others. But there are moments where you become the observer of the object and subject. So I had this very profound philosophical. Sometimes I I try to find existential Rubik's cube and philosophically try to solve them. And it was very strange to me how thought was owning matter. And for the longest time, because language is pretty much, I mean, don't get me wrong, people are very sophisticated nowadays, but language is our main technology. If they took the languages that we know, if they were all erased from our memory, we would be lost in our world, in our own worlds. Language is an ability to recreate a new dimension, a new way to perceive reality by allowing, by in some sense presenting a bridge between two inner universes. That's what communication is. That's the value of communication. It allows imaginations to blend. And the power of the imagination being due to being stationed in the mind in some sense is an unknown force. That means we can put symbols on existence and think we know what existence is, but experience speaks the loudest. And experience, you cannot experience something without transformation. And that is the biggest problem of the world. The reason that's the biggest cause of violence and cruelty, because people find it easier not to change their ways. But if you don't change your way, you will meet a dead end eventually. Because the road that we walk on life is not just in one dimension, it is multidimensional. It has to do with how the idea of you ethically creates the world. There's a sort of, I'm not relating per se to Sam Harris's work, but I feel there's a sort of inner moral landscape. And this inner moral landscape has to do with how the being's intelligence put the world on an axis for itself. So it's strange. Our personalities want to eternally live on. You know, examples of this are all the great conquerors on this planet, like Alexander the Great, Cyrus the Great, I don't know, some other person the Great, like the Great. And so the relationship our subjective self has with the world is instantaneous and infinite. The relationship that our body, our physical self has, our objective self has with the world, there's a delay in it. There's a cause and effect delay. And at the same time, matter doesn't need thoughts. It is thought that needs matter. Because the most profound thing, all these meditators saying, don't have thoughts, don't have thoughts, like, why are they saying that? Why does ancient yoga tell us not to think when the mind seemed, it took billions of years to evolve? Now, the first answer is they got it wrong, but I refuse to believe that. I believe that the reason they said don't get too attached to your desires, don't let yourself be pulled by desires that are senses of self that are most of the time not yours, they're marketed. And when I say marketed, I'm not talking about media. Everything in life is exposing itself to you. It's not just the air that's going in your lungs, it's the ideology of the world that moves through your mind. Now, what the mind is a bridge between what I consider personally to be the body and the soul. The soul is another word for conscious attention, but it is the attention without the frame. It's kind of looking at a painting that never ends. That's kind of like what awareness is in regards to consciousness realizing its awareness. So fundamentally, the more you have an extreme kind of exploration attitude, you become isolated in a single dimension. And then eventually you see you got to take it easy, and then you suddenly become multidimensionally natural. There's a sort of artificial multidimensionality, which our technologies are going to hit it first. Our science fiction writings hit it first, actually. But our physical technology is going to allow us to experience multidimensional reality. Symptoms of this are virtual reality, augmented reality, various forms of uh, playing around with the sensory perception to create more than the senses believed previously. So, what is the benefit? What is the benefit of this curiosity towards a sort of eternal effort behind a temporary existence, between the desire to exist or in a temporary playground or battlefield? Pretty much, it's kind of like telling a soldier, why fight in the war when you know everybody's going to die? And it's one of those situations where you kind of see, okay, everybody will die. Like if a young child, if you're every child by the age of 8 should acknowledge that there is death. They shouldn't understand it per se, but they should acknowledge there is an end to things. When I was younger, I didn't. And when suddenly there was a loss in my reality, like my grandfather passed away, it shook me. It shook the personality that had not paid attention to what was there before. So now, life per se, there are moments I look at it and it is filled with meaning. It is filled with various contexts that, in some sense, my attention penetrates. But there are also moments where I am nothing. When I say I am nothing, I am literally, the senses are not generating ideology due to the reactions of and ever from things that exist. Many unknown things that are beyond our comprehension. Now, what happens is that as knowledge evolves, advances, it is expanding. As it expands, it reaches the edges of its design. When it reaches the edges of its design, it changes the design of the world that gave it that edge. So a sort of multidimensionality that perhaps occurs on a subconscious level in yogic practice is that once there is no longer an ego, once you're no longer a thought, your subconscious, your consciousness and subconscious merge. So you're always at the edge of the unknown. So the subconscious is no longer the mystery of your conscience or the inner guiding voice of the logos. The conscious and the subconscious become the same, and the dynamic shifts from conscious, subconscious, unconscious to just pure conscious, pure unconscious. And the being comes into a sort of conclusion that we're oscillating between non-existence and existence. We're vibrating between the world being here and not being here. The moment in some sense, every time you blink, a sort of eternal self gains structure behind your mind. Every time you don't see the senses echo in the memory. But when your eyes open, suddenly this memory, all this imaginative potential suddenly becomes kinetic reality. It's very unique. Life is way too designed to conclude a comprehension to it. It's as if, like, if life was a box, then okay, you could look in the box and see what's there. But if life is a box that you cannot even see the edges of the box because the universe is so vast, in some sense, you begin to realize the only box that you have access to is the box that your mind imposes on the world. And our minds have done that. This is why when you look at any object around you, this object, there was a moment when you were a child where you had no idea what this object was called. It was just phenomena present. But when you suddenly realize, like, this is called, like, this is glass and it's a glass cup, it's very unique. Because behind your eyes, ideas have divided. One idea has divided into many. Because I always wondered, how is it that we remember? And I finally concluded it's kind of like this. It's like our memories throughout this life is like one giant cake constantly being cut into smaller pieces. And the moment we die, or as we get closer to the end, this giant cake, through various experiences, has been cut up in so many ways that, in some sense, the memory, it's like you no longer want to eat a millimeter, you know, a square millimeter cake, millimeter squared cake, like you're in some sense no longer require it's like here. It's like the moment you open up a particle and you see particles in it, you begin to see dimensions. When you see dimensions, the mind automatically wonders about the edge. And so, what's the most unique thing that could happen to existence? That it's infinitely multidimensional. That's still a very heavy idea for our minds to try to even visualize. But I feel it has to do more with our emotional being. Our emotions are the same face in two worlds. Our species wasn't always in the state of mind that it is now. We can say it even if it has never been in this state. What seems to be occurring is that we are, I I feel we are creatures beyond our sensory perception, and we have been limited to our sensory perception, where the creature is now, first it managed to attain some sort of universal human rights. Now it is seeking sort of universal internal rights, which means how far the mind or the will influences the form of the life form. Pretty much, it's like every day the person finds a shape to be. And the universal law of change shows that one's ideas are as limited as the world is. I can't want the world, like, imagine if a person wanted the world to turn the other way, and because it didn't, it suddenly had this kind of constant stress and unnecessary uh, uh, internal turbulence. There's a story. There's the story that three friends were walking in a forest, and suddenly between the trees they see a flag post, like this really high flag post, and they see this sort of, let's say it's a white flag. They see this white flag there, you know. One of the friends turns around to the other friend and says, "Hey man, you see that flag? It's the wind that's moving that flag." The second friend looks at it and says, "Nah, man, I could tell I'm seeing it. It's the flag that's moving. It's not the wind. It's the flag that's moving." And so these two friends suddenly find themselves in the debate of a lifetime into questioning the validity of a paradox. Now the third friend and says of the universe to translate into subjective phenomena. This attention is crucial. This attention is life. Your life is pure attention, and what moves in this attention somehow accumulates to be an identity. It's like you put a camera and like on a busy street, and all those people passing are like different data that comes to the creature. Now the data gets stored. It gets stored, but it gets stored in a place where it can be accessed. If I ask you, remember like what you did like yesterday, you can remember, you can access that image. Even though you're not in that moment. You're in a totally different moment, but you can remember. And something unique about remembering is that you remember where you are currently in. So what that means is we're this creature that is going through physical moments, and somehow its intelligence is taking snapshots of every moment, and this snapshot slowly begins to fade through time as new data begins entering the system and being processed. So for me, there's a lot of content and research done about, in some sense, how how what we know is influencing what we don't know, or something in our attention. Like, let's say you see an object, like I see this cup, immediately my knowledge tells me this is a cup, it's made of glass, it's made of some company made it, you know, it was an effort to of the company to be present in the economy, and my mind can just constantly, based on what I know, fill up, subjectively, metaphorically fill up this cup with meaning. Okay. But the thing with the mind and thought is that language can be a beautiful empty infinity. Empty infinity is a concept I've developed. And in some sense, it's not something I developed, it's just something I've noticed. I remember noticing it when I was a really young kid, and I had two mirrors, and I stood in front of those two mirrors facing one another, and there was a sort of infinite reflection. And in that moment, my eyes were seeing something that seemed real, yet a part of me knew that it was not real in the way that my eyes were seeing it. And that which knew in that moment was not of sight. That means you are an intelligence that processes data, processes sensory existence into an ideological container that becomes the story of your livelihood. But beyond these stories, the world turns. This world turns beyond stories, I'm telling you. So, what does that mean? It doesn't mean get rid of the story, it means realign the attention. As you realign the attention towards your true nature, what occurs is that your true intelligence steps out. You begin, the moment you're comfortable with this world, creativity is everywhere. The moment you're uncomfortable or there's some sort of restriction or resistance, it's as if the world doesn't speak. The world, your karma could be a process where it's as if the world is alive and you don't recognize it, so the world thinks you're ignoring it, and then, oh man, karma is a finish the sentence, It's like in this dance of elements, self-awareness has evolved. Why? Why is it that we are the very unique species compared to every other creature in nature that has evolved to such a sophistication that we make skyscrapers? What that means is I don't see lions building kingdoms. I don't see dolphins making underwater cities. It is man's mind that gave it an ability, and what was man was an evolving phenomena, and it still is because the world is. It's like if the car is moving, you might be sitting still, but you're actually moving. So if the universe is changing, you might think you're not changing, you're just simple you, but you're changing every moment. That's the point of life. It's not meant to be a snapshot. This is why beliefs lead the person astray eventually if the person doesn't allow him or herself to see more. To see more, you got to allow sight to expand. To become a new person, you gotta allow your character to change. You gotta begin making different decisions, you know? And any person in a situation where you can say the inefficiency of the situation is there's more of a chaos, higher ratio of chaos compared to order in your moment of experience, just change your decisions. Just change your decisions and begin to see how a different sort of karmic distribution uh, occurs for you. Your the way you experience your moment changes because primarily the way that the self that saw that world has changed. We can't say we are life forms. in 2019. We seem to be thoughts that acknowledge the form of life. Yet free will is the extra permission. It is the extra space given to the mind of the human species. I want to share some quotes from this Sufi mystic poet by the name of Adcock. He's this ancient Persian poet that wrote a lot of mystical, kind of enlightening poetry. So let's go through this quote tunnel of Farid al-Din Attar. He says, if the eye of the heart is open, in each atom there will be 100 secrets. He says, the home we seek is in eternity. The truth we seek is like a shoreless sea, of which your paradise is but a drop. This ocean can be yours. Why should you stop, beguiled by dreams of evanescent dew? The secrets of the sun are yours, but you content yourself with motes trapped in its beams. Turn to what truly lives, reject what seems. Which matters more, the body or the soul? Be whole, W-H-O-L-E, be whole, desire and journey to the whole. You see? Individual temporary creatures are going towards eternal collectivity. Again, the same thing. He says, let love lead your soul. Make it a place to retire to, a kind of monastery cave, a retreat for the deepest core of your being. And one of his best quotes is, the sea will be the sea, whatever the drops philosophy. It's like this ancient poet from like 900 years ago is spitting such rhymes, you know. Farida, he has this quote where he says, the fruit of love's great tree, the true value of something, when you are not distracted by the looks or the voices, and you in some sense see the actual being there. In another one of his quotes, he says, when first you enter wisdom's sea, beware, a wave of indecision floods you there. And that's very typical, because when you enter the unknown, you have to, in some sense, reassimilate your experiences into however way you change based on that unknown experience. It's kind of like all these people talking about, like Terence McKenna talking about the psychedelic experience, and saying these people who take psychedelics are actually changing the primary structure of their character and childhood conditioning. You know, as if sobriety is a state of maintenance, but altered states of consciousness are in some sense states of evolution. They're states of change. It's a sort of world introduction and world creation at the same time. He says, a man whose eyes love opens risks his soul. His dancing breaks beyond the mind's control. That means once you truly live for life, you experience rhythms of alignment with your universal sector that begin revealing your mind is not individual to you, it is a field of intelligence. It's very unique. The more you pay attention to matter, the more your intelligence appears as a particle. The more you pay attention to consciousness, the more it appears as a field of intelligence, because your mind is choosing to own the whole moment as itself. It owns the whole moment as itself because it concludes or considers, at least subconsciously, that the moment is where the thought is born. We're such creatures of ego that we try to own thoughts, and that's why we feel our depression is justified. But you cannot own a thought. When you understand this, you are free. You are free from the stories that don't have to be. Um, okay. Uh, Attar goes on some next level depth here, and I'm going to try to give some suggestion of what I feel he's aiming at. He says 1,000 for his when. By the way, guys, this quote I'm reading, when you hear the word "his," think of it as if he's talking about ultimate truth, um, the presence of ultimate truth. And so Attar says 1,000 for his love expired each day, and those who saw his face in blank dismay would rave and grieve and mourn their lives away. To die for love of that bewitching sight was worth 100 lives without his light. None could survive his absence patiently. None could endure this king's proximity. How strange it was that man could neither brook the presence nor the absence of his look. That means you cannot see truth without being it, because you can only see what you are. That's it. And when you do, it shocks you because it's not ideological. So the rules, the subjective, incorporated interpretations of the laws of nature into a sort of story of a social and cultural bound creature eventually leads it towards the simultaneity of emptiness and fullness. That's pretty much the edge of philosophy, guys. You know, everybody can be a philosopher the moment that life is non dual, and then new perspectives can enter. It's like, think of it this way: there was a time where people were enslaved, legit, like they were treated like animals by evil, by those evil and smarter, and in some sense they were chained like animals, humans. And it's crazy because human beings are very sophisticated creatures. It's like kind of like enslavement is a sort of disallowance for possibility. You see, so it's a big offense. It's an incredible offense to an eternal being. Temporary enslavement. It's like rude. It's like the simulation is just how a part of this universe is just being rude. Attention establishes itself in stories and matter. Yet the attention is not the matter and the story. So what is it? If it's not, if our true presence right now, if our true nature is not objective, is not matter, is not subjective, it's not thoughts or emotions or anything else, what is it? That's the question we're asking. And sometimes when we don't have answers, we take pride in trying to look at the question as closely as possible, not avoiding the question. Because arrogance is blind. We all know this. We all know this whenever we see an angry person. What do we see? We see somebody so convinced by what they see that they can't see through the eyes of other people. So it's easy for them to be violent. Violence arises out of blindness. Let me tell you, it's simple. If somebody just put a box on your head, you would eventually get angry. Let's say if you couldn't take off that box, and you'd become violent, you'd become savage, because your civility's free will is being limited. And civilization, you gotta, it's a sort of creation process. You gotta build yourself into greatness, and you build by just the honest effort that no longer is dualistically expecting things. You give the world its freedom to be itself, as much as you see, allow, you want the world to give you freedom to be yourself. Pretty much that's the desire of every wealthy artist. That the state of mind of wealth is not one where lack is superior. It's as if anything in your life you stop thinking you have a little of, you'll suddenly have an incredible amount of. And don't think it's just placebo. Placebo is too complex, because there's free will. Placebo can't just be placebo, because the free will is unknown. We have no idea, in some sense, um, how the free will moves unconditionally the conditions of matter. It's like ancient Vedanta gave a clue and said, Purusha Prakriti, consciousness, matter, simultaneous. That means what came first, the chicken or the egg? They both appeared in the story at the first, in the same question. They're both in the same question. You see, they both have a common existence. So it's a trick question, I think. What came first, the chicken or the egg? They were both projected at the same time in existential value. So it's like the world came first. That's the answer. Did the chicken or the egg come first? No, the world that we're there in, that came first. The primary non-dual foundation of all the dualities of your life. You know. So if a box was on your head, and the person would become angry and become violent, so imagine a conceptual box is on your head. And this conceptual box has to come from an honest effort for you to explore the world you're living in. Think of it this way. You entered Wonderland, but you didn't need to pay. You were just born into it. And now you're in this land of wonder, in this world with known and unknown dimensions, and there's a civilization going on. As if creatures on this planet, at least the human species, evolved to a point where it started caring for what it was and what it made. And that's the story of civilization. How responsibility occurred through the self awareness of mortality. Mortality made us responsible, because we're like, oh my God, we could die. For me, it's kind of hard, because to take the path of an explorer means to leave behind the worlds you know. And sometimes it means that somebody can become a very harmonious social entity, yet there could be views of self lingering in that being's mind that, in some sense, pinpoint the opposite. So for me, I have sought truth in the order, and suddenly I realized the edge of the order is chaos, so I thought truth was chaotic. There have been moments I confronted my fear, challenged the chaos, and suddenly I saw the truth was the order. And then I began to realize experiences don't have that far to go ideologically. They loop around themselves. That means memory is a sort of looping process. It's like pistons of a car's engine. Do you see? There's a sort of cyclical behavior to how the intelligence heals itself. Every time there's a wound, and white blood cells are commanded to go attend the wound, in some sense, in the biology of the being. So this is very unique, because it means the law of repetition and filling up space is present. That means if you don't take the job, if you don't go to the job interview, somebody else will. If one moment of manifestation is left untouched, another being will touch it. What that means is opportunities are being chased by creatures that have not understood they are the creators of the opportunity by the presence of their attention, not by an ideological free will. Because in ideological free will, every day you have a different view of self. Like if I ask you how you think of yourself now compared to when, like 10 years ago, you'll be like, bro, I totally see myself as a different person now. Like I've become somebody, some other being. Do you see? So one can say memory is the effect of a singular cause of awareness. It's as if the nation that was divided and conquered eventually began to realize if it was before it was divided, it was not conquered. Learn from your mistakes by reverse engineering into a new clarity. Adcock goes on to say in another quote where he says, were you indeed not blinded by the curse of self exile that still grows worse and worse, yourselves would know that though you see him not, he is with you this moment on the spot. What he means is that the person who feels he doesn't deserve truth goes through a process where he isolates his attention into its subjective reality. It's kind of like we step into our minds first, then we activate our bodies. As if when you wake up, your mind activates, and then your body is active too, based on how the intentions of the mind. We separate ourselves and then separate the world to understand it, not realizing in our differences are what we have in common, that we are different, rather than our differences being the cause of our separation and dysfunction in civilization. The fact that we are existentially changing beings, the fact that we're all on the same rock, it's incredible. It's incredible. The fact that it's all here. What could be more divine? It's all here. Existence is here. This is a sort of pure philosophical common sense where the senses are just here. It's remarkable. It's as if before I existed, the decisions of my parents and how the decisions of their parents influenced my where I was kind of how I entered the world. That means we enter the future through the past because the present moment is attributeless. The present moment is the eyes that are constantly seeing the past becoming future. Do you see? The present moment is attributeless, but the past is attribute, has attributes, the future has attributes. And this is similar to saying that when you're asleep, you're in a dream. When you wake up, you're chasing dreams in a dreamlike manner. I don't believe you can become enlightened. Uh, I This is a very bold claim. I said in one of my talks. I really enjoyed saying it. It's that I there was a time I said in one of my talks. No person has ever been enlightened because enlightenment is a transition of an individual uh, um, shape into a collective shapelessness. So it's never, a person can never get enlightened. The person realizes how the truth already is, not what the truth should be because they can't see it. That leads to violence when you have to protect an image in a changing world. That's a sort of insanity. That means when you're at a party, explore your world before having thoughts on it, and you will get surprised of how much data, how much things will arise in your attention. The fact that you don't have a prejudice, you don't have a bias, you're just observing raw data before it is translated into subjectivity again. So pretty much we're oscillating between thoughts and being like particles, like stuff, being star stuff, as Carl Sagan says. I'm going to share some more quotes from Attar. He says, "He who would know the secret of both worlds will find the secret of them both is love." Now, this quote has for many scholars and philosophers brought forth a, a sort of mind shattering curiosity to see what is this guy saying. And what that means is that there have been considered to be two worlds, the visible and the invisible, the spirit world and the non-spirit world. Okay? Now, I'm going to say a different approach, and I'm going to say instead of seeing spirit world, non-spirit world, let's say we see individual existence, we see the existence of ourself, and then we see the existence of the world, where that self is being a self and being separate based on everything else that it feels it is not. So what it means is that the both worlds, one is again shaped individual existence, temporary existence, and the other is collective, uh, shapeless, uh, sort of edgeless, endless experience. You become pure experience. You're a creature of experience and a creature of matter. Now, if you take the path of experience, you will go towards your honesty. In your honesty, no longer you will be in a realm of chaos. Is here, and that's enough. Once you understand that, you see how you should have ever listened on this planet. That means children are not, they don't understand why they go to school. I'm telling you, your mind is your greatest investment. And your mind has to do with not data, just data accumulation, but data processing, but it has to also do with how all this data efficiently advances. And the data eventually concludes as a vision. That means all those people seek a purpose to their life. They want the easy way out. They want the unknown to become known suddenly, for them to not think there's something they don't know. We cower away in knowledge, by the way, because the unknown is too much to confront. And the unknown, to be truly wise in your approach to it, this is why Farid al-Din Attar, Attar in Shapur, he says, "He who knows the secret of both worlds will find the secret of them both is love." Why does he say love? Because love is acceptance of pure being. Love is the eyes of truth. Without love, you cannot see, nothing is true for you. It's all just chaos in the making. So order is sandwiched between, an ordered dimension is sandwiched between two sorts of chaos: the chaos of the empty end and the chaos of the full end. That means we can say a dimension is a sort of fullness and emptiness, a sort of planet or world in a space. we will eventually see the non-conceptual reality cannot be real or unreal anymore, because it no longer depends. You experience a truth that does not depend on the past or the future or language. You don't go the path of a prophet. You don't go the path of a kind of ancient, yogi or something. You kind of recognize every generation has its own requirement. Every moment is its by design. Its purpose is how it is being. That means joy and love is a sort of acknowledgement of being. And this acknowledgement of being must occur without an eclipse, without distortion. Distortion is when you feel you can hurt the world because it has hurt you, but the world has actually brought you here. It's as if your best friend gave you a ride, like a couple hour long ride from one place where you were in an emergency, and then when you step out of the car, once you get to, like, where you were meant, like, where you got where you and the friend were heading, the best friend, and suddenly you become incredibly rude to your best friend, you see. And so the best friend begins to see that there is a lack of ability of the other to consider the value of the effort in regards to just a sort of the situation. So what that means is when someone does too much good things for you, you're going to not like them. What that means is because you will feel you can't return the favor if they do too big of a favor. And so for me, it's very insane because a lot of children who, once they graduate from university or whatnot, and they go into the working reality, it's as if they're trying to stick to the program, yet they realize it's a jungle. In a jungle, nobody can teach you. Like in a street fight, the martial artist can't use his katas or his practice. Like he can't. It's the real deal. That's the point of life. Seek the real deal. Seek a clarity that is unconditional. Farid al-Din he says, don't be dead or asleep or awake. Don't be anything. What you most want, what you travel around wishing to find, lose yourself as lovers lose themselves, and you'll be that. That means fall in love with how life and existence is here and happening, and unbelievable levels of your intelligence open up. They open up in a sort of rhythmic abidance with how the universe speaks, and yet our ears are not but will soon be open to. We are cosmic creatures. We can't avoid it. The whole cosmos, it's not like God is watching. God is also being you. Religion says that. So it's one of those things where the seeker who feels guilty is like, whoa, God is being me as I'm feeling guilty, you know? So it's like, it's the unique presence of truth within all things, because the sort of inner truth is a field of intelligence. You are constantly finding the world the world changes quicker behind your eyes than it does in front of your eyes. Once you understand this, you begin to see how thoughts must be observed. That means if you're even a scientist, you are an incredible meditator. Because you can focus on one thing. You can observe and examine and not judge. That's pretty much the ability of a scientist. Not judge until evidence makes it seem so. So you see, it's as if a sort of deliberate patience to be more efficient in decision making. However, this must now move towards the inner realm. We must begin wondering how we are subjects in motion, not just objects in motion. Sometimes I look at words and I see other words in them. For example, I look at the word change in the description and I see the word age. I look at the word lecture and I see the word cure. I look at the word desire and I see the word dire. Like you see what I mean? Like it's as if one thing can hold within it more dimensions than uh, it seems so. You know? Plus, the universe is too big to measure. I believe that. I believe that our measurements have value in, in our own domain of consciousness. Beyond it, they are meaningless. It's like it doesn't matter if your hands get dirty as long as you find a diamond. That's kind of like the unique enlightenment beyond suffering. You're not in a state of advanced efficiency, so keep searching in the dirt. And as you search in the dirt, you suddenly begin to see your efficiency depends on how far, uh, or not how far, but how true you're being with your moment of being. That's where divinity happens. That's where the eternal effort and the temporary desire become an endlessly spinning coin that no longer needs to be looked at. That's a sort of serene peace beyond even the concept of eternity. It becomes silence and stillness become the gatekeepers to that inner paradise. Thanks for listening. Every moment is has incredible value. You know, creativity doesn't just have to do with something the guy has to do to become creative. Creativity has to do with the world you're living in, the world you see. The endless arena. Much blessings and namaste.